Right, that wasn't quite as quick as a Formula E pit stop, but not bad in terms of resetting a stage for our opening panel of day 2. This is the CSO Strategy Summit. So let me introduce our panel today. First of all, closest to me, we're joined by Tom Salisbury, Sustainability Director at GKN Automotive. Also with us, Hilary Tam, Sustainability Leader EMEA for AWS. Olivia Ruggles-Brise, Vice President, Sustainability BCD Travel. And finally, Davide, Stronati, Chief Sustainability Officer at Nuclear Decommissioning Authority. A warm welcome for our panel, please. Right, well, if you were here yesterday, you will know the drill. I ask everyone to do a 30-second introduction to themselves, because from experience, as I said yesterday, if you give people a minute, they tend to take 5, and we want to get to the good stuff. So let's do 30 seconds from everyone, please. Tom, after you.
Great, thank you. Great to be here. So I'm Tom Salisbury. I'm Sustainability Director at GKN Automotive. So GKN Automotive is a Tier 1 supplier for the auto industry. So we're supplying basically all of the global car manufacturers. And before that, I was in the global sustainability team at Vodafone. And then before that, I was at SAB Miller, which is a global beer company. So beer to phones to cars.
That is a one mic drop of a CV, just 3 words. Love it. Hilary.
Cool. Hi, everyone. I'm Hilary. I lead sustainability for AWS as a part of our commercial team. AWS, for those who don't know, provide cloud technology services. We have a booth. We can learn more a little bit later. But my background hasn't always been in technology, although my last role was leading global sustainability strategy for ARM. I've spent most of my time in pure play sustainability consulting with a dabble in comms and media. But very early days, the start of my sustainability career as a Greenpeace climate and energy campaigner. So, yeah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Olivia. I'm Vice President of Sustainability at BCD Travel. BCD is a corporate travel management company, so we manage business travel on behalf of many of the world's largest companies. Maybe some of you here work for companies that are our clients. I've been in my role for 3 years. I have always worked in the travel industry in various strategy, communications, and latterly sustainability roles.
Right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Davide Stronati. I'm currently the Chief Sustainability Officer in the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority. As it says, we do the decommissioning of the 17 former nuclear power plants in the UK. And I've been in this role for 5 years. Before, I was the Global Head of Sustainability and Climate Change in Mott MacDonald, which is an employee-owned multidisciplinary consulting company. So my 3 words are infrastructure, infrastructure, and infrastructure. 20 years of working in sustainability in the infrastructure sector in the UK and globally.
Thank you very much. Well, let's start with a question on leadership. And in the current business and political climate, what I'd love from each of you is one particular quality that a great CSO has to have at the moment. I'm sure there'll be lots of similar ideas each of you have. Tom, I'll give you the pleasure of going first, which is the slightly easiest job because you're closest to me. That one quality that a great CSO really needs to have at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, guys, but going first, but I'd say collaboration, because it's such a cross-functional role. There's so much to do in terms of translating that external environment, external context, whether it be changing customer expectations to regulation, and translating that to what that means for your business context. And the only way you can really then do that is working across the business, collaborating with others, and because ultimately to deliver on the sustainability strategy, you are reliant on different parts of the business to take that accountability, take that ownership. And yeah, so I think the collaboration side of it is critical, really.
Okay, so collaboration. Hilary.
Okay, so maybe I'll double click on that a little bit. I loved what you said around translation. I think being effective translators and communicators right now is super important to be able to, go from policy to business, to translate science into strategy, from operations into how this, actually impacts business value. I think when you're able to communicate and combine language with intent, that's where you really start to drive influence with those, different stakeholders across your business, outside of your organization. So I think that's especially important now when there is a lot of that political noise, being able to cut through it, and also when business climates are also under pressure.
So a good communicator or translator. Olivia?
Yeah, and I think kind of carrying on from that, it's what you guys have just described is quite tough, and I think that resilience is really key. So it's not easy. You have to win over or persuade or influence all kinds of different stakeholders. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And I think the ability to keep going, keep trying things, learning from what works and what doesn't, and essentially not giving up, I think is really key.
So resilience. Davide, finally.
You got what I had in mind.
Oh.
So I need to find another one. And I think, energizing, because the position of CSO is an incredibly lonely position to a certain extent. And there's a lot of pressure, a lot of expectation on you. So, and you need to find energy every morning and every evening, to carry on doing your job. So maybe energizing.
Okay, so we had, for anyone who wasn't writing that down, collaboration, communication, resilience and energy, and I think that's a good combination of all of them. Let's move on to business strategy now and how CSOs can go about connecting sustainability goals with the wider business strategy, and that's something a lot of you have just touched on there. Hilary, if I could start with you, how do you go about doing that? It's very easy to say, but often much harder to deliver. From your experience, how do you go about it?
Yeah, no, I think that's where we're all currently under pressure, right? To demonstrate how we are, again, driving business value. And I think if sustainability is going to be bolt on, it's never really going to move forward. How do we actually embed it, integrate it, and make sure it's built into our businesses? And that requires that translation role, right? If we're talking about creating new revenue, opening new markets, improving employer brand equity, that's when sustainability becomes part of what our leadership cares about. And I think that's one of the real key things. And I'm very fortunate, but also have the challenge of being in a commercial sustainability role. So if you think about operationalizing sustainability in your operations, talking about efficiency, cost savings, those are big motivators that we're all familiar with. But in a sales org, how are we demonstrating that sustainability can create net new value? Again, back to that kind of top line piece. And I think that's where it's really moving towards as we're seeing sustainability as that growth engine and that source of innovation.
Yeah, that really is a unique challenge. Olivia, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's showing kind of what positive role sustainability can play in whichever part of the organization you're talking to. And I think that from a strategic perspective, it's around sustainability is not just a kind of one-dimensional thing. It cuts across all parts of the business, so making sure that across all those different parts there is an understanding of the value that sustainability can bring, and then it kind of becomes strategic. As Hilary said, you can't have it, if it's a bolt-on, then it's not going to be strategic, but how do you make sure that all those who are responsible for developing the strategies in their parts of the business are thinking about it strategically? So it comes back to the collaboration and the communication piece.
Yeah, I did plan that bit of it, going through those key skills at the start, because I've got a feeling we might keep coming back to that. See, we do plan these things. Davide, your thoughts?
Right. When I was the global head of sustainability in McDonald's, I remember I wanted to open new markets, business development, and being strategic from this perspective. Then I realized I wanted to know much more about the strategy of the business. How can I support the strategy of the business? So learning about the issues and opportunities of the organization and how I can contribute. So speaking their language, addressing their problems, which this us and them doesn't work, it's our problem. So starting to become our strategy, sustainability is an integral part of what the organization is doing. And then, of course, sustainability can always offer new avenues, but actually supporting the existing strategy is fundamentally important.
Thank you. Tom?
Yeah, I'd really emphasize that point around just really knowing the business and the strategy and the commercial strategy, because if you're not really fine-tuned into that, then you're always setting yourself up for a bolt-on. I think as also part of that, I think there is an element of sort of picking your battles, and there are times when a bit of pragmatism is also needed. Like, not necessarily that that's what we want, but the reality often is that there's only capacity to do a certain amount. So really focusing on what are the big wins or the big areas where you want to really have impact, and that might mean not being able to do everything at once, and that's okay, because the business also doesn't operate that way.
Let's move on to what's always a difficult word, but one that always needs to be addressed, and that's greenwashing. No one wants to be accused of it. I can almost feel the wry smiles coming from the room, especially when there's great work going on with the best intentions. And as you said there, Tom, you can't do everything at once. You know, you're operating in a business. You can't always move as quickly as you'd like. So I'd love all of your advice really on this. When there's great work going on with the best intention, how do you get the messaging right here to avoid maybe an unwarranted accusation, or to make sure you're getting your work and your actions across in the best way? Olivia, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so I work for a company that makes its money out of flying people around the world for business. So this is a topic that we think about a lot. I think our main strategy in this is to, first of all, not try and make any claims about sustainability. And if we do, they're very much rooted in, data and science, and usually very small in scope. But we sort of talk to our comms teams about it. Let's not make claims. Let's not use lazy language. We're constantly, my colleague Pippa is over here, we're constantly removing words like eco, travel, and things from press releases. So it's about being specific and data-driven, but at the same time, comms teams want to tell a story, have to tell a story, and you do need to do it in a way that engages the audience. So I think, for us, it's constant dialogue with the comms teams and making sure that we kind of work things through together. So far we've not come across too many backlash issues. But yeah.
Again, that returns to being a good communicator, not just internally, but externally as well, and making sure that messaging works. Davide, your thoughts on the greenwashing question?
That's a great one, because working in engineering and infrastructure sector, greenwashing sometimes doesn't apply too much. It is very sectorial, the greenwashing. And sometimes actually we need to tell the world what we are doing. Actually the opposite. But I think just being honest and being chill, this kind of authenticity is incredibly important, because you are under scrutiny constantly. So you cannot just make claims, because these claims, they are going to come back to you and bite you if you are not authentic. So I think just, being honest is the best.
Yeah, I think authentic, as you say, was a very, very key word. Tom?
Yeah, just emphasize that. I think, again, coming to the collaboration point that you're also saying, Olivia, around working with the comms team and brand teams who, with sustainability can get quite excited around the sort of opportunities and what they want to say. So just really being tied into those discussions and bringing that evidence and data to be authentic. I guess the other thing I'd say is that I also worry about the sort of flip side, which I'm sure everyone here has been aware of, sort of the green hushing phenomenon, particularly in some parts of the world. And that, I worry that will also grow too much, that then we sort of go the other way, and there's too much risk aversion around being able to talk up some of the great things a business is doing, or talking up some of the benefits of sustainability. So I think that's also going to be an interesting balance for organisations, not wanting to greenwash, but also not, but still making sure they're able to talk and communicate about what they're doing.
And it wasn't a difficult enough job as it was trying to avoid greenwashing. When you're trying to avoid green hushing at the same time, that is a challenge. Hilary, your thoughts?
Yeah, 100%. I think the green hushing is a really important one to call out because it makes progress invisible. And I think that's part of the challenge we're having with the noise. You know, people are scaling back from sustainability or doing less, but the reality is people are doing the work. And not being able to talk about it. And I think when we think about morale and our teams and the energy, if we're not celebrating successes and being able to, you know, talk about the great work that we're doing, even though we're all on a journey, I think that's a really, really hard place to be. And I think, you know, to counter that, to make sure that we are communicating in a credible way, it's really about radical transparency. How do we take folks along with you on the journey, be open and honest, you know, share those successes, but also the learnings and the kind of, you know, this is what we did, this worked really well, but, you know, in the future, this is something we're going to really need to focus on because it's still a gap. I think for me, you know, again, having to demonstrate commercial value, I could very well say, hey, we went to Sustainability Live and we engaged 800 people. You know, again, you know, we need to be very careful. You know, how many of those have been, you know, meaningful conversations that we can follow up with, where we actually had a deeper understanding of how we might be able to help versus, again, those flashy numbers. And when you're kind of pioneering ways to measure impact or, again, translating sustainability into commercials, you're going to be putting forward metrics and KPIs that don't exist. And so having the kind of methodology of, with the data I have, this is how we're looking at it, this is what constitutes and counts as a fan versus anyone, you know, just turning on their TV. That becomes really important.
A key theme that seems to be coming out of this is balance, both in terms of strategy internally, approach. Let's stay with that theme of balance and how you go about designing a strategy that works not just for the short-term needs of the business, but the long-term needs of a long-term sustainability strategy, because as we said, you can't get it all done overnight, unfortunately. David, your thoughts? How do you strike that balance? Because that, for me, as an outsider looking in, seems a huge, huge challenge.
Yeah. My suggestion is always to start with the end game. You start with the end game, you start with what you want to achieve, your vision, the purpose, and so on. And then you work backward and you assess where you are, and then you fill the gap. So this is how you set yearly annual targets, annual measures, and so on. But clearly having the end game in mind is always important. Hilary was talking about the KPIs and so on. They must live for years and years, possibly 5 to 10 years, if not beyond, to have a trend and so on. So always having the long term in mind and building the short term based on the long term strategy. That's how I did it.
Thank you. Tom?
Yeah, I mean, I think the short and long term strategies have to be linked. I think, you know, we've been through, I'd say, a phase of a lot of companies setting kind of long term ambitions, targets, without necessarily understanding how they're going to get there. And I get that, and it's good to have ambition, it's good to have a North Star, but I think as much as possible to really operationalize those targets, even if they're sort of longer term, to really have, to make sure your board, executive team, have a clear idea of these aren't just pie in the sky targets, this is what it will take, this is how we will get there in increments. Because like I was saying earlier, you can't do everything at once, but as much as you can, having a clear plan which really links that short term and long term. And I think maybe some of those businesses who didn't necessarily do that are then finding they're sort of having to then, you know, go back on those longer term targets because suddenly they're 10 years away and getting quite close for comfort.
Yes, you just have to do a quick scroll through Sustainability Magazine and the website to see how many are readjusting their targets. It's it's almost a theme. We could do an entire section in the magazine about it at the moment. Hilary, your thoughts on that balance?
Yeah, and I love the title of this summit, the CSO Strategy Summit, because sometimes I feel like the S in CSO can really be interchanged, sustainability and strategy, right? For me, I'm a strategist at heart, and some of the best advice I've gotten from some of the leading chief strategy officers for big companies is strategy is really about choice, right? You can't do everything at once, otherwise that's not very strategic, and it's also not meant to be static. So I know there's again a lot of this conversation around, companies are now looking at resetting their strategies. Your strategy should be a living, breathing, agile kind of guide. Yes, you will have those kind of long-term goals and objectives that you anchor to, but at the same time, you're going to have those short-term, more tactical, executional pieces that you need to lean on. So for me, having that kind of almost dual horizon, like strategic planning, where you have some of those things that are going to start delivering value, whatever that looks like in your organization today, to earn trust and earn credibility and continue to have those, along for the ride with you and earn you a little bit of breathing space to go for those big bets. For us, it's, looking at innovation, it's looking into the nature and biodiversity space, it's looking into, markets where sustainability is completely, interwoven in how they transition and move into the future state. I think sometimes we get very focused on the bean counting, if you will, where because there's a lot of pressure on this role and this function, it's hard to sometimes kind of pull back and look at it as a full picture. And really, I think across the panel, how many times we've already said strategy. And really leaning into that kind of core skill that we bring as experts in that space.
Olivia.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add is for some reason with sustainability, there seems to be this expectation that there is an end point and it will be achieved, and you have a strategy and you will achieve it. And I mean, no business strategy works like that, do they? So it's constantly evolving. You constantly have to be aware of what's going on, in the markets in which you operate. In a company like ours, where from a sustainability perspective, we're very dependent on what the travel industry suppliers, so the airlines or the hotels, are doing themselves. So I think it's that, yes, you need the long-term vision, but you need to prioritize what's important now, and you need to be able to evolve as things change, but you still need that vision so you don't get kind of pushed off course.
Yeah, if only there was a sustainability final boss that everyone had to achieve and the job was done. I could suggest one, but then I probably wouldn't get allowed into New York for Climate Week next week. So we'll move on from that if we can. We've been I'm moving on from that really quickly. Let's talk about influence and this communication theme that's come up a lot in this conversation. And I'm going to raid all of you for your experience here, because it's so easy for all of us to sit here and say, we've got to collaborate, we've got to work with other people, we've got to lead people that aren't actually part of our own teams, that kind of thing. I'd love to know how all of you do it in practice, in person. If you've got an example of how you personally go about doing that, that would be wonderful. And Tom? It's unfortunately your turn to go first, so you've got the least time to come up with an example. Yeah. But I think if we've got some practical ideas, that will really work well.
I mean, I've been in my current role nearly 3 years, and I think one of the things I was really, particularly as it was like I said at the start, a new sector for me. One of the first things I was really spent time doing, and this sounds really simple, was just to really get to know the business, because I think there would have been no credibility of kind of coming in from Vodafone, which is different sized business, different sector, and saying, okay, we need to do this, this is what we did at Vodafone, and it worked at Vodafone. Let's work at GK and Automotive. That just lost all credibility. So actually, getting to know the business and understanding the strategy and building that knowledge, then and then looking at how your sustainability strategy really links, adds to, complements that, and is integral to that, that's how you build that credibility of the strategy, I'd say.
Thank you. Hilary.
Yeah, and maybe like tapping into my campaigner, the campaigner in me. It's really around, I think, just echoing what Tom was saying, understanding your stakeholders and what they care about. You know, it's very rare that I'm asking teams to support sustainability. Rather, it's really positioning how can sustainability present an opportunity for you. If it's operational, again, cost efficiency, resilience. If it's marketing, you know, brand reputation and equity. If it's sales, you know, like sustainability as a door opener, you know, how many net new leads you're generating, conversations you're having. So, yeah, I think it's much more, you know, I guess sustainability professionals, one of our key skills is effective stakeholder engagement and management. Now it's really going deeper. You don't need to become, you know, part of the HR team or part of the sales team, but really understanding and using, again, that communication, that translation piece to understand what their motivations are. I think one of the really great books, What Makes People Tick, I think by Chris Rhodes. That's a great book. You know, it's a book campaigners use, you know, across time. But now I think in the sustainability space, it's become even more important in terms of how you influence, because so much of it is beyond our sphere of control.
It's tailoring that message. That's great advice. Olivia.
Yeah. I mean, I think just building on that, kind of my experience is you need to meet people where they are, and then you need to you know, show how you can help them do what they're trying to do and how they can do it better. I think that being yourself, you know, sounds like a stupid thing to say, but actually, if you can go to them in an authentic way and get to know them, and then you build up trust and respect, that has enormous benefits in terms of how you can really kind of push things forward. And then the other thing I would say, which perhaps is a bit strategic, is, you know, you can identify some key influencers within the company that if you can work well with them, then it will open doors and make things happen quicker.
Davide.
That's precisely what I was going to say again, which is fantastic. You know, I always work in sustainability, change, and leadership. You need to build up your team. So find your friends, make friends within the organization at every level, from the board, exec, directors, middle management, and especially the younger generations. Galvanize them, give them voice, find the outsiders. And all these teams, at the end, it's going to be a big team, is going to work with you in influencing the organization to embrace sustainability, to deliver sustainability, and to make this change. So that's how it works. And if you have clients outside, find your friends with clients. They will make a change in your organization. As it works with me right now, working for the government, important to work for the government, with the government, regulators, with the UN in Vienna on the Atomic Energy Agency, because it is a highly regulated environment. So if they change, we will change. So find the leverage.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Just really
Carry
quickly,
on.
I love that, you know, find your friends, because I like to say champion your champions as well, because there's always this kind of one-way direction of, you know, sustainability, help us, but actually we create a lot of value and open a lot of doors and opportunities. So it's sometimes like flipping that mental model.
Yeah, I like that. Champion your champions. I'm very conscious of the time and the fact we had so many questions yesterday, I didn't get round to enough. I still want to talk about regulation and your advice for people starting as CSOs or sustainability leads. But we'll hold that for a second and go to the audience. Do you have any immediate questions? Oh, is that one at the back? Is that a hand up? I think it is. Yes, it is. It is surprisingly difficult to see hands in the middle through those lights.
Hi, I'm Beth Crowley from Waterscan. I wanted to ask, how do you strike a balance between sort of delegating among teams, because sustainability covers so many different topics, without creating like silos and inefficiencies in the process, particularly when it comes to like reporting? because obviously things like water, biodiversity, climate change, they're all a part of the remit, but often when you delegate, it becomes really tricky to then scoop it all up into one kind of consolidated strategy.
So maybe I'll tap into that. We can have a further conversation. And we did a great workshop yesterday, but for AWS, like, it's really even just transforming how we're thinking about that, which is, first of all, from a strategy perspective, it's really around embedding into these different teams and building those champions within each of those departments, I think can help. But in terms of the reporting and the data piece, it's really around building that integration and that data foundation where, you're not just delegating, like, other parts of the business own this data as well and have the ability to also track and change and add to it. So it's really around building that data foundation that brings others on board and allows folks to integrate. And I think that's where, for us, we're really leaning into technology, not as the silver bullet, but as one of those tools to really help minimize that friction.
Yeah, I was going to sort of mention accountability as well, sort of building on the ownership point. I think, I'm not really interested in having a large sustainability team, to be honest. I'm more interested in having the right accountabilities across the organisation and ownership and buy-in from that leadership of that function through the function. And I think if that's genuinely in place, then it should sort of fold together, really.
Okay, thank you for those answers. We have another question up here.
Hi, everyone. I'm Denise Sophia, Head of Sustainability at Concheap. And I have a question around purpose. I was wondering whether either in your current roles or in previous companies that you've been working in, you had a strong purpose, and how you really demonstrate that you are a purpose-driven organization. What do you have to do?
Do
you want to go?
Yep, let me go. So, as I said, engineers, mission, always a mission. But effectively, because of failed merge, and the organization I was working before was a little bit looking around, what should we do next? What are we? And the purpose concept came in quite strongly. Was 2016, SDGs. So why we are here? So all these questions, they came maybe from what was a very sad moment for the organization, but actually we found the opportunity to start asking very tough questions. Why we are here? And that went down so well across the business, being employee-owned, because it really dictated what kind of people we are, what we bring, what are the differences between what we are interested as citizens of this planet and professionals, and trying to, close this gap if there is a gap. So that was how we did it. And then communicating. We changed the website, recruitment, projects we were working for, projects we were not working for consciously. We are saying, I don't want to get involved into this. So that's how we did it.
Thank you very much. Any further on that?
Yeah, I think maybe we've seen, I think an era where sustainability teams were developing sustainability vision, sustainability purpose statements that were very separate to their core business purpose and strategy. So I think it is, again, just embedding, aligning, and finding that in your core business strategy and purpose, and being able to articulate that. And that is very much the path to being a future fit business anyway. Organizations are looking to articulate their purpose beyond the day-to-day, because it's important to their stakeholders, but at the same time, sustainability also needs to ensure their purposes aren't just fluffy and completely, separate to what are the key growth indicators and drivers and initiatives in their business. So I think if you're, resetting your purpose, make sure you have, the right stakeholders from your business on board so that you're crafting something like very holistic.
Thank you very much. We have another question down at the front.
Hi, I work in apparel, and we are going from the least regulated industry to the most regulated industry in a really short amount of time. What advice have you got for people in my industry that are looking at, they're frozen and looking down a barrel of an unbelievable body of work? Like, what would your tips be?
Should I take that? My tip would be, don't do everything all at once. Take it bit by bit. And have some mechanism to perhaps assess which regulations are coming first, which are most important, which are most material, a prioritization, and not try and do everything all at once.
Yeah, I think it's that translation again as well, in terms of interpreting. You've got this regulation. Well, what does this actually mean? What do you need to what needs to be in place to meet that regulation? And yeah, that may well be a phased approach, but I think it's using that. And sometimes, when regulation comes in, that sometimes can be quite a good opportunity from a sustainability perspective, in terms of building the business case and the rationale. Is like, well, we've got to do this, but then it's being clear. This is what it's going to take.
Yeah, precisely. I was going to add, having moved from a completely unregulated organization and into a highly regulated organization, definitely, compliance with regulation is a must, but don't stop there. Carry on, sustainability is beyond compliance with regulation. And definitely, if you need to make friends, regulators, and start to talk to them, and also share what you're already doing for complying with the regulation. It's going to be fruitful.
Okay, thank you very much. And that leads us on perfectly. I honestly didn't plant that question, because that leads on me perfectly to advice. And this is for people who are maybe starting as a CSO or a sustainability lead. They're stepping into that role. We've got about 3 or 4 minutes left, so if I can have a minute from each of you, no pressure. A minute of advice that you wish you'd been given when you started in a leadership role. Tom, you're closest, so after you.
Probably is that it's that balance of, we're all in sustainability because we're passionate about seeing business being a force for good, and we all know as a society we're not doing enough quick enough, right? We know that, but I think it's how you channel that to actually get things done in a business as well. And I think just balancing that enthusiasm to do everything at once with what's going to actually get action in a business.
Yeah, degree of pragmatism there. Hilary.
Yeah, I think the advice I would say is probably, you don't have to do it all. It's not all on you. I think as sustainability leaders, our expertise is really cross-functional and general, and spans across so many topics across all areas of the business. And it's really the role for us to, hold that vision, keep us on course when it comes to strategic direction, but we're also curating and convening and connecting the right expertise to help us into that next phase, which is execution, because we can't, we can think big and we can dive deep, but we can't do it everywhere. But there is expertise within your organizations, folks who are very qualified and experts in those spaces that we should be tapping on, and bringing on board. So I think it's really kind of not doing it all, and in doing so, we avoid burnout, because I think when we feel like we have to do everything, that's where things get overhand, and because we care about it and we're purpose-driven, we end up overstretching. And then just very quickly, just wanted to touch on the regulation piece, because I think that is one of the things that we're hearing a lot. Like, regulation tends sometimes, they're lagging indicators of where business, society, policy is at. And oftentimes they're doing consultation with industry to kind of shape that. So yes, regulation is important, but to take it from that kind of penalty space and, the stick, we need to look at, market signals to future-proof our businesses. And I think that's where, in the apparel industry, there's a chance for those wanting to leapfrog and take the lead to actually look at, instead of just complying, like, what is the future of the apparel industry? You know, what do our stakeholders need from us? And what's going to define, you know, how we continue to be successful, because it's going to look very different from, you know, how we've been successful in the last 5-10 years. So yeah, that's kind of my advice.
Yeah, I wish I could remember who it was who sat on one of my stages once to a regulation question, and their answer was just, if you're compliant now, if you're just compliant now, you are already behind. And they stopped. And it was one of the best mic drop answers I've had on a stage. But it's absolutely, absolutely true. So, Hilary, thank you. Olivia, your thoughts on your advice for people who are just entering those leadership roles?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of carrying on from what the others were saying, is that, you know, the ability to say, I don't know, because there is an expectation that if you are working in sustainability, that you know everything about this massive topic with all its many constantly changing dimensions. And I think to be able to say, I don't know the answer to that, or this is changing, or, you know, an element of that kind of vulnerability, because I think that helps people in the company to understand also that this is a changing thing. And, you know, it's kind of interesting when, you know, I do a lot of work with our finance team on the data side of things, and, you know, going through audits and stuff, and just to get people to understand that the nature of environmental data is different from financial data. There aren't answers to everything. It's not perfect. You know, and that this kind of, it is not, going back to what I said, it's not a final end game here. It's not a single, simply defined activity. It's huge, and it's changing, and therefore it's a process.
Thank you. And Davide, I'll give you the final word.
That's amazing. So go for it, I would say. It's crazy, it's insane. Be crazy, have fun, be intellectually curious, don't burn out, of course, but especially choose your organization you're going to be the leader on sustainability very carefully, because if they are going to support you, it's going to be an amazing journey. Otherwise, be very cautious about it. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. So it's just returning to those 4 words we had at the start: collaboration, communication, resilience, and energy. And I think they've tied in very nicely to everything we've discussed on this stage this morning. So thank you very much indeed for that. Just a quick shout out to 2 workshops that are starting now. We had some fantastic feedback from the workshops that we were running yesterday. So at 11:45, so that's 2 minutes ago. So I apologise to the events team for overrunning. Sustainable logistics is a strategic necessity. That's with DP World in room 1. And closing the gap between sustainability, ambition and action, that's Kindrel in room 2. So those are starting now. But for now, a huge thank you to our panel.